Hey guys, welcome back to Greg's Fish Room and happy Halloween! Yes, that's right, it's Halloween and we are back in the kitchen one more time to make some tasty treats for our fish. Now, we are going to be making pumpkin for our plecos and our shrimp. We're going to do it two ways. We're going to do fresh pumpkin and we're also going to dehydrate it so that we can store it a little bit longer. Now, before we get started, it's important to note that pumpkin is not a great food source for your fish or your plecos long term. This is a treat. This is something that comes once a year. They love it, but it's not a balanced diet for them. So like everything else, it's good in moderation. So with that being said, let's jump into this project. So come along with me and learn how to be a better aquarist. Okay, so we have our tasty pumpkin here. I happen to get a sugar pumpkin, although any pumpkin I think is going to work just about the same as far as your fish are concerned. This might taste better if you're making a pie for yourself though. So I'm just going to start by removing that sticker, and the really neat part about pumpkins is they're really expensive, sort of early to the middle of October, and then they become dirt cheap right before Halloween or right after Halloween, because usually the demand drops off to almost zero and there's way too many pumpkins, and so a lot of them end up going to feed pigs or they just sort of rot and decompose and go in the compost bin. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna cut this pumpkin up, and really I'm not a pumpkin carving expert here by any stretch of the imagination, and so essentially the same rules don't really apply as carving a pumpkin for Halloween, but we're going to start by trying to cut this in half just so we can hollow it out. And obviously we're going to want to remove the loose membrane and all of the seeds from this pumpkin. You can use a big spoon, but I actually find using an ice cream scoop with a stiffer handle makes this quite a bit easier. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna scrape this down until we get just the hard rind of the pumpkin. So there we go. Half of this pumpkin is cleaned out. Let's go ahead and do the other half. You can save the seeds, dry them out, and bake them as a treat to eat for yourself. There's plenty of recipes online for that. If you don't want to waste those, you can certainly pick them out and save them for that. You could also save them to plant next year if you have a green thumb and you have space for a garden. Okay, there's both of our halves to our pumpkin, cleaned out reasonably well. Now, the two methods that I'm going to use to feed this to my fish, the first is we're going to feed it fresh. And for that, what I tend to do, which seems to work best, is I can cut this into pieces, kind of like if it was a watermelon. And I leave the rind on, and essentially what I try to do is cut a piece that's no more than about an inch thick. And we're gonna cut a bunch of these, and we'll maybe even cut them in half like this, and then we'll feed a wedge to each of our pleco tanks. They're gonna rasp at this surface, so the more surface area you give them, the better it's going to be, and they're going to mostly ignore the hard exterior of the pumpkin itself. So something about that size is fine for about a 40-gallon, 50-gallon breeder type tank. So we're gonna cut some of these up and we'll keep them fresh for our plecos, and the rest we're gonna put through the dehydrator. All right, I think we're gonna do 8 pieces fresh, and the rest we're going to dehydrate. So I'm going to set these pieces aside, and we'll feed those fresh here in a few minutes. And we'll focus on the rest of this here for the dehydrator. So dehydrating pumpkin or other fruits or vegetables is a great idea. It can help to preserve your food and make it last longer, and allows you to feed something at a later point in time. So with this in mind, with pumpkin really only being cheap and available one time out of the year, the dehydrator allows me to feed this throughout November and December and maybe even into January. I can continue to feed pumpkin to my plecos and to my shrimp. Now, I don't feed it very often, so you know, it's not something I'm feeding every day to them. It's something I'm going to be feeding maybe at most once a week, if that. And so I don't go overboard on buying, you know, the whole pumpkin patch worth of pumpkins. It's just not worth it, because I'm not going to go through that much. But what we can do for the dehydrator is try to get this into essentially 1-inch chunks or strips. And so with the flesh of this pumpkin being about 1 inch anyways, what I can do is I can cube this as one method for the dehydrator, and then we'll make some strips as well. And what you'll see once we get over to the dehydrator is that device, essentially it's a slow heat and a fan. And so the heat pulls the moisture out of the food, out of the pumpkin. It makes it sort of shrivel down into a much smaller piece of material. And then the fan pulls that moisture out of the dehydrator so that more moisture can come out of the food. And then that gets pulled out to the point where there's really no moisture left, and it becomes a shriveled little piece of pumpkin. And you'd be shocked. You're going to be shocked at how much this dehydrates down and what it actually looks like at the end. So we're going to do a few here that are cubed, and these are going to be good, especially to feed like shrimp tanks. You know, you're not going to need a gigantic piece of pumpkin to feed a shrimp tank. So one little cube, once it's dehydrated down, is going to be plenty for feeding your shrimp. So we've got some of those. And then the other thing we can do here is we can create some strips of pumpkin as well. And so for that, what I'm going to do is essentially cut this into strips. And the smaller the strips, the faster it's going to dehydrate. So if you've got something that is super thin like this, it's going to take less time than something that's super thick like that. So if you can get some semblance of consistency on the thickness of the pieces that you're making, it's going to help it to all dehydrate at the same rate, and that way you can put it all in at one time and you can take it all out at another time, and then you're done with the dehydrator. It makes life simple. If you have stuff that's thicker and some in the middle and some thinner, essentially what you're going to have to do is put them on different trays in your dehydrator, and then put them in and take them out at different times once they're done. So that's the story on the dehydrator and how to prepare the pumpkin for the dehydrator. We're going to finish chopping this up, and then we'll go over to the dehydrator and load it up. All right, we are at the dehydrator. You'll have to excuse the munching and crunching sounds in the background. That's just my dog eating her kibble. This is an Excalibur food dehydrator, and this is great for a number of different foods, from fish and meat to make jerky, all the way through all of your fruits and vegetables. And essentially what it has are these trays, It has sort of a mesh liner to it, and they're just plastic trays that slide in and out. And essentially what we're gonna do here is fill up our food on these trays, slide it in, and then start it up. For pumpkin specifically, we're going to do the vegetable setting. So it's going to be 125 degrees Fahrenheit, which is not very hot at all, but we're going to do it for a very long period of time. We're going to do 12 to 15 hours, and that's going to allow it to sufficiently dry out. Now, with food dehydrators, essentially, you can't really dry for too long. Essentially, you're going to get whatever moisture is in it out of it, and then there's just no more moisture to get out of it. So the worst you're going to do is just waste energy or electricity by continuing to dehydrate when there's really no more water leaving. So for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this up, let it dehydrate overnight for 12 to 15 hours. I'll come back in the morning and check on it. If it looks like it's good, I'll turn it off. If not, I'll just let it go for a few more hours until it looks ready. The only thing you can really mess up is putting it at too high of a heat. If you do that, essentially you might be just cooking or actually burning the food that you're intending to dehydrate. So that's why the lower temperature settings are generally best. Now, you don't want to go too low for something like a meat. You know, if it's too low and you go for too long, it could end up actually spoiling before it completely dehydrates. But for vegetables, you know, it's a lot of water content, and so it takes a long time, but it doesn't take a very high heat to get the job done. So again, we're doing the vegetable setting, 125 Fahrenheit, and I'm gonna start at 12 to 15 hours. Essentially what this dehydrator is a giant plastic box with a little heating element to it and a fan to extract the air from the inside. And that's it. It's a very simple product here, and we're just going to load these shelves up until they're full, and then we'll come back in the morning and check them out. So I put a lot of the strips that I've cut on the first 3 trays, and now we're getting down to the smaller stuff. I gotta open my second bag here, and we'll get a few more pieces into this dehydrator before we start it up. So what's left are these cubes, and these cubes are actually thicker than the strips are. And so the one thing I will check for in the morning is to see if the strips look like they're done, but the cubes look like they could go a little bit longer. I might pull the strips out and let the cubes cook, dehydrate for an extra hour or two until they all look like they're pretty consistent. But it's pretty easy to tell, and we'll take a look at that in the morning. But for now, this is 4 trays in this Excalibur dehydrator that are gonna have pumpkin on them, and we'll see how they do. If you want to pick up a dehydrator, if you don't have a food dehydrator, it's a great tool to have. It can save you quite a bit of money in the long run, and helps to preserve a lot of your fruits and vegetables and other foods you might be feeding around the house, but also to your fish. So check out the link below. I'll leave the link to this exact food dehydrator that I'm using. Okay, now that we've got all that pumpkin in the dehydrator, we're just going to put our door on the front. It's just sort of like hangs on the front. And then the only thing we have left to do here is crank this up to 125. So put that on 125, and you can hear it makes a little bit of a noise, but it's not too bad. So we can leave this running in the kitchen overnight, 12 to 15 hours, and we'll come back and check on it. Okay, it is the morning of Halloween, and it's time to check on our pumpkin pieces. Remember these? These used to be 1-inch cubes, and look how tiny they are now. This is what pumpkin looks like when almost all of the water is dehydrated out of it. Now, I checked these at the 15-hour mark, and they weren't quite done yet. Essentially what I did was I looked for the largest, thickest pieces, like this one here, and I just broke them open. And if the inside is still has some moisture to it, which this piece still does, it means they're not ready yet. Now, some of the thinner pieces are definitely ready. I can tell that there's no moisture left in those thin pieces. That's why it's best to cut these as thin as possible, because it shortens your drying time dramatically. So you can see how tiny these pieces got. This was a full slice of pumpkin, and yeah, it's pretty thin. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna leave these in for a few more hours. So I checked them at 15 hours and they were not done yet, and now we're at 17 hours. They're still not quite done yet. I'm gonna let them go for another hour or two, and we'll check back in before we start feeding them to our fish. All right, check this out as a quick reference. So this is the dehydrated pumpkin that we just made. It's good to put it in a sealed bag and use a desiccant pack. You can see it's nice and orange. This will probably keep in a cool, dry place for, I would say, 3 to 6 months, as long as you've gotten almost all the moisture out of that in the dehydrator. And this is dehydrated pumpkin that's probably 2 or 3 years old. I treated it the same way, put it in a sealed bag with a desiccant, and you can see it's kind of brown, and there is a little bit of mold that has started to form on this stuff. So it will not last forever. Now that I have my fresh stuff, I'm gonna toss this out. I kept it around for several years just to see how long it could go in a bag, in a sealed bag, before it would start to look gross. And the answer is 2 to 3 years. But I would definitely recommend only keeping it and only feeding it for 3 to 6 months. So that'll get you through to the springtime, when hopefully some fresh vegetables start to become available for your fish.
right, guys, and that's gonna do it for this special Halloween video. Hope you guys have a great Halloween. I hope you eat lots of candy. These fish are definitely chowing down on their pumpkin treat today, and you can see that they equally like the fresh pumpkin and the dehydrated pumpkin. So two great options for your fish and for your shrimp as a nice little treat. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys later. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did, please give it a like, please subscribe, but also please check out Nature Forged Aquatics on Amazon. You can check out products like this, the Nature Forged Aquatics alder cones, which is a great product to add to your blackwater tanks, to your shrimp tanks, to your soft water aquariums. Provides natural tannins, allows you to naturally and slowly drop the pH in your aquariums. It's a great product. This is a 4-ounce bag. It has tons of cones in it. It will last you a very long time. It also helps support this channel because Nature Forged Aquatics is my brand. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys later.